Om Namo Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya. Lessons for Life from Swami Jagadatmananda's inspiring book, Learn to Live, Volume 1, Chapter 1, Infinite Power Hidden Within You. This is a touching story of Father Flenegan's infinite love, patience, and empathy, which transformed a hardened criminal to a responsible citizen of the society. This is the real life story of Father Flenegan, a man of God who had the firm belief that each soul was potentially divine, and he showed that with unselfish love and infinite patience, we can win anyone over in this world. Wildness softened into mildness. Now let us listen to Swami Jagadatmanandaji's moving story. Wildness softened into mildness. Father Edward Joseph Flenegan, 1886 to 1948, of America, was a priest trained in the Catholic tradition. He took up the mission of reforming juvenile delinquents who got into the bad company of criminal gangs and committed various crimes like murder, robbery, violence, and cruelty. In the boys' town founded by him, there were orphans of all races and faiths. The efforts that he made and the patience that he showed in transforming delinquent children into citizens of good conduct and behavior are without a parallel. He brought into his boys' town young people who had been detained by the police for various criminal offences. Father Flenegan treated them in conformity with his basic faith that every person is essentially good, despite the fact that they were guilty of criminal acts. He took them into his confidence, showered his affection on them, endured all the trouble they gave him, and all the mischief they committed, prayed sincerely for their welfare, and worked for the uplift of these children so that their lives could be brought back on track. This was Father Flenegan, who was loved by all and who was a living model of the spirit of love, endurance, and service-mindedness. Father Flenegan firmly believed that children could be won over by a person of ideal conduct whom they would imitate, and not by admonition, rebuke, and punishment. Here is an incident narrated in Father Flenegan of Boys Town, which points at the secret of how Flenegan succeeded in converting a boy who was murderously cruel and violent. Eddie was rendered an orphan when he lost his parents at the tender age of 4. By the time he was 8, he had acquired the skill and competence of becoming the leader of a criminal gang. Curiously, most of the delinquents in his group were older than him. Even young men had accepted him as the leader. Eddie had committed murders to prove his claim to superior prowess. He had single-handedly committed a bank robbery, decamping with thousands of dollars. With a stolen pistol, he broke into many restaurants and looted them. On one such occasion, when he was gearing to open fire on an old woman, he was arrested by the security. When Eddie landed in Boys Town, he had no fear of the police. He committed acts of willful malevolence, domineered over others, vandalized everything that he laid hands on, and insulted others in his class using foul, abusive language. He used abusive words while referring to Father Flenegan, who was highly respected by everybody else. He looked upon everything with utter contempt. Taking part in sports and games, playing in the school band, or working on the field was a source of boredom to him. When others were offering prayers, he would mimic a cat. He would spoil in no time the work done by other boys who put in hours of diligent work. During the 6 months after he arrived in the home, nobody had ever seen a trace of a smile on his lips or a drop of tear in his eyes. Eddie was regarded as a creature filled only with venom from head to foot. All this was too much for the warden to endure. The warden wrote a letter to Flenegan. Dear Father Flenegan, I have heard that according to you there is no bad person in this world. Could you tell me how you would characterize this boy Eddie? One night, Eddie was groaning in his sleep. Just by glancing at his face, Flenegan guessed that he was suffering from high fever. Though he had been offended by his uncontrollable misdemeanor, he wholly ignored it and looked after the boy with greater attention and affection than other pupils. When he recovered from the illness, Flenegan and other teachers and the fellow pupils continued to look upon him with special attention and tenderness. Senior boys took him to the movies. He was given all preference at lunch or breakfast. They saw to it that he lacked nothing. Still, there was no trace of a smile on his face. One day, Eddie went directly to Flenegan's office and said, So you are trying to make me a good boy. Do you think you will succeed? Just now I kicked the matron. What do you say to that? Eddie, still I maintain you are essentially a good boy, replied Flenegan firmly. Eddie said, What did I tell you just now? You are repeating the same lie. You know that I am not a good boy, but you still keep on saying that I am a good boy. By repeating the lie, don't you establish yourself as a blatant liar? Flenegan thought for a moment. He felt that it was a turning point in the life of the boy. He asked the boy, How do you recognize a good boy? He obeys his elders, doesn't he? Yes, Eddie nodded his head. He obeys his teachers, doesn't he? Yes, Eddie said. Then that was what you were doing. But Eddie, till the other day, you had not had any good teachers. Vagabonds had been your guides. You obeyed them. They misled you. You followed them and you thought you were essentially bad. But if you follow a good teacher, you too will become a good man, said Flenegan. These words touched Eddie's heart. For a moment he stood, reflecting and silent. Eddie came to understand that there was some truth in Flenegan's words. They drove away the deep-rooted thought in him that he was by nature a bad boy. He went over to the other side of the table and approached Flenegan. Flenegan held out his arm and clasped him in a tender embrace. This is a very touching scene. Flenegan held out his arms and clasped him in a tender embrace. The boy had started shedding tears. His cheeks were wet with tears. 10 years later, Eddie graduated with high grades. He joined the army and fought in the war. He won several accolades. He won the esteem and affection of his friends, acquaintances, and colleagues. He was regarded now as a trustworthy and honest gentleman. The emphatic assertion that he was good drove away the feeling that had become deep-rooted in him, that he was essentially bad. Flenegan had immense faith in the divinity of a child. See how his confidence was rewarded. The boy, misguided and looked upon with suspicion and distrust, could regain his faith in his own goodness and prosper in life. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.